Welcome to Colonial Classics, a food demonstration with the House of the Seven Gables, live in the Gables Cafe kitchen. Tonight, I'm going to walk you all through making a colonial molasses cake from the early American cookbook, Authentic Favorites for the Modern Kitchen, which you can buy in our museum store. The House of the Seven Gables strives to be a welcoming, thriving historic site and community resource that engages people of all backgrounds in our inclusive American story. Continuing this work takes effort, time, and money. We would like to thank our members who are here tonight and invite you to become a member if you are not. We have some great programs and member events lined up this year and coming in the next year in 2022. We have included a link for membership in the chat. We have also included a link for donations to help us cover the cost of this demonstration and to support our work as a community resource. Any amount is greatly appreciated. We encourage you to support small businesses in your community whenever you can. This evening, we purchased our spices from Salem Spice on Pickering Wharf. I would personally like to thank all the people who have supported this program and got it running safely during COVID-19, especially Holly Watson, who is here with me tonight as my support crew. During this demonstration, please turn off your cameras and keep yourself muted. If you have a question or comment at any time during this demonstration, please type it into the chat and it'll be read aloud to me. The goal of this demonstration is to connect with everyone, so don't be afraid to engage with either me in the chat or with each other. Now, who's ready to get started? Hi, everyone. There it is, adjusting the knowledge. It's a bit wobbly. Still using that new Padcaster, which we started using last time. So we have fingers crossed that we have some stronger Wi-Fi. And so this will hopefully work a little bit better than it did last time. For those of you who I got really wobbly. Okay. For those of you who joined me last month, so in November's demonstration for the onion soup, we did have a lot of technical difficulties. So if at any time you are having trouble connecting, please just type something in the chat and we'll try and figure out what's going on. So yes, today we're going to be making some molasses cake. So I'm going to start not with molasses, but we're going to start with sugar, which is actually where molasses comes from. So to make the cake, you have to use a half a cup of sugar and then you cream it with your half a cup is half a cup. There's a lot of half cups in here. Half a cup of sugar. So I've been leaving this out all day, not all day, but for a large amount of time. So that way it gets nice and soft. So I'm able to cream it, hopefully without a blender, because I packed my blender away like a silly person before this demonstration. So sugar, and therefore molasses, originally comes from, it was originally domesticated in New Guinea, and then I need a different thing for this. Let's try that. New Guinea, and then it was processed in India, and then eventually the way it got all the way over here was through Columbus on his way to the New World. So that's how we started getting sugar over on this side of the world. And so sugar is how we get molasses. It's a very complicated, labor-intensive process. In order to get it, you have to sort of double boil the sugar in a way. The process, so first you take, it's a product of the beetroot, the sugar beet, not the beetroot, that would be different. The sugar beet and sugar cane. And so you're taking the juices from it. Really wish I had a blender, guys. This was not my best plan. There's always something, you know? At least this is softer than it was earlier today when I did it the first time. So yes, I was on the juice. So yes, you're extracting the juices from the sugar, and then that you're boiling. And so when you're boiling it, you're creating that crystallization. So you want it to crystallize, and that gets you your sugar. And then when you boil it again, that gives you a bitter taste, which is the molasses. And we're going to take this out of here. So much butter, guys. I love it. It's a whole stick of butter. Go ahead and add more if you want. Always more butter, just not too much. It doesn't work. No, not too much. Holly's giving me a no. Not too much butter. It's no fun.
It will throw off the chemistry of your bake if you use too much butter.
That's true. There is a lot of chemistry involved in baking. One time I did not add nearly as much. It seemed like I had enough flour, and so I decided to go with my instinct, which ended up being very wrong. And I was unable to make cookies because I didn't have enough flour. It was too sticky. All right, so now that we've finally creamed the butter and the sugar, we're gonna add in our beaten egg. One beaten egg. Beaten egg and our spices. So for the spices we have ginger and some cinnamon. Mix that in there. It's a pretty simple recipe, which I love. It goes pretty fast, especially if you're using a blender to blend your butter. And then let me double check what I got here. Oh, while this is all happening, I'm preheating the oven to 350. And that's the spices, I forgot to mention, was 1 teaspoon each. 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of the ginger. Yep, and then add those in the mixing bowl. And now the buttermilk. So I decided to use buttermilk instead of sour cream because making sour cream makes me very nervous because I'd have to mix milk with lemon juice, which does not seem like a good thing. I could end up having some spoiled milk instead of that.
We've got a question. Did I miss it? Why did you pick this recipe?
I did not tell you why I picked this recipe. So first I'll tell you a little bit about why it seemed that the cookbook picked the recipe. So the cookbook, which is, I have to read it because that's a long title, The Early American Cookbook, Authentic Favorites for the Modern Kitchen, chose the recipes in that cookbook because they are easily, so according to the person who put the cookbook together, they found that it had some historical significance to certain historical figures. Each recipe is connected with a historical figure. This one is James Oglethorpe, who was one of the founders of the Georgia colony. And also because they're easily translated into a modern kitchen. While I'm talking about why I decided to choose molasses, I'm going to pour the molasses. So it's a half cup of molasses. And I never understood the phrase slow as molasses because actually this is going pretty decently. It's pretty fast. And I think also so that is actually the reason I chose this recipe is because of the molasses. Because I don't often work with molasses. Plus molasses is very good, especially with gingery. Wow, okay, now I get this molasses when you get to the end of it. I proved myself wrong. All right, there we go.
We've also got another question. They wouldn't have had a blender in colonial times, so what would they have used for blending and creaming the butter and the sugar?
So they would have probably brought a wooden spoon, unlike me. I totally forgot a wooden spoon. I love wooden spoons. They did have mixers. Their mixer was not exactly mixer, so this kind of mixer, except it wouldn't have looked like this. It would have been we have one actually in the Gables kitchen. It's a piece, kind of looks like a sage. So like you see clumps of sage, it's kind of what it looks like. So you're able to use that to beat. Now this does not look very appealing. You can see, it doesn't look the best, but trust me, once we add the other stuff, it'll get a little bit better. I'm definitely getting that bitter smell from the molasses right now. It's not until it cooks that you really start getting that smell that we associate with like gingerbread cookies, which is a very powerful smell. This whole place smells like it because I just finished making that cake over there. All right, so now that that's in there. So yes, I chose it because of the molasses, and I associate the molasses and the gingerbreadness with Christmas, and so with the holiday season, which I celebrate. And so I went with that. So I almost forgot my baking soda. So Holly, if I could have my very hot bowls. So you're going to dissolve your baking soda with hot water, with a tablespoon of hot water, because you want to release the gases, so that way the cake does not expand too much. So there's science involved. I'm not a scientist, so I really don't actually know exactly. There's some sort of carbon something that's released. Gas. Science. Historian, not good at science. So I'm gonna put that in there. There we go. All right. I also chose this recipe because of the molasses, because of John Turner I and John Turner II, who traded in molasses in the West Indies. And so even though, so that was part of their business, and a lot, molasses is really associated with this part of the country, with New England, especially Boston. We have our Boston, I've lost what it was. The bread you make in a
Boston brown bread.
Boston brown bread. Thank you. I totally blanked on that. It's the BBB. So Boston has a long history with molasses that goes far, far beyond the 1919 molasses flood.
People are asking, will we be able to get the recipe because things keep freezing on them as as you're adding ingredients?
Of course, as I'm adding ingredients. Yes, you will all be sent the recipe at tomorrow when I come into work. I will send out the thank you for attending along with the recipe, and I will let you know when you can find this recipe. Find the video on YouTube. This is also being streamed live to Facebook. So you'll be able to go onto our Facebook page to be able to find it. So I will let you know all of the details, I promise. I'm actually surprisingly, usually I forget to actually give you the measurements. So I'm actually surprised myself in getting the measurements properly this time, because I have a big cheat sheet right here. So yes, speaking of ingredients, I just put in the flour mixed with the baking powder. So it's 2 cups of flour and 2 tablespoons of baking powder, not baking soda, as I kept saying. Please don't mix those up. Like Holly said, chemistry of the bake will totally be thrown off. So I was mentioning the 1919 Boston, the molasses flood of the North End in Boston. So that, I don't know, does anyone know about that? I'll give you a little bit. So the whole slow as molasses thing really didn't take effect there, considering the molasses was going at 30 miles an hour. It was a 40-foot wave of molasses that had erupted from a 50-foot storage tank of molasses in Boston's North End. And it was an unusually hot January day. It was about 40 degrees. And so everyone was outside enjoying the day, but the storage tank wasn't properly taken care of. That mixed with the unusual hot weather caused a pressure buildup, which led to it exploding. 21 people died and over 100 people were injured, and it destroyed buildings, bridges, and a bunch of other stuff. There's some very interesting pictures. Northeastern University put together a website with a 100th anniversary of the disaster, and they collected some really interesting photos that were published in the newspaper around that time. So check that out if you have the time. It's really cool.
Emma says she knows about the molasses flood, and then both Ellen and Heidi were wondering what they would have used in place of baking soda, or if they had baking soda during colonial times.
Yeah, that's a question that I had not prepared myself for. I have no idea. Oh no, I'm trying to think. Yeah, that's a Google question. Holly trying to stealthily get over to her computer. It's very crowded in this kitchen, so she's trying to. So yeah, I don't know. We're Googling at the moment, so I'll let you know soon. I'll just magically appear out of nowhere. In the meantime, I can tell you about some other random stuff. So actually I need because this is actually good to go in the pan. So you guys want to take a look at it, nice and close. You'll see that. It's that nice light brown color that we associate with gingerbread. And it's starting to smell sort of like that sugar is really mixing with that molasses now. So you are starting to get a little bit of that smell like gingerbread. This isn't how they made gingerbread back in colonial times. They didn't actually, gingerbread was different than what we know of it today. I was doing some reading and it's more of like sort of like breadcrumbs. They didn't use molasses in it. It was basically like ginger kind of cookie things. Didn't have the molasses. That didn't come into the molasses didn't come into the recipe until about the 18 to 1900s, based on the recipes I was looking at. All the other ones seemed like it wasn't as sweet a kind of cookie that we know of today. They were finely decorated, so they had that really interesting decoration, which I really think is fun. Hoping to be able to do some gingerbread house making this year. So that would be really fun. Are we getting any questions in the chat?
Oh, right. Oh, people are weighing in. They were making cakes in England back then, so they must have had some kind of leavening.
Yes.
Baking soda came around in 1846, which is what I had found online as well. Google/Colonial Baker says no, it wasn't available. According to Google, pearl ash was used, also known as soda ash, and pearl ash is potassium carbonate. So clearly they had leavening agents, but they weren't necessarily in the form that we know baking soda or baking powder to be today.
Like there was definitely a way to do it because like they raised their cakes, they raised their breads and such. So, well, with bread, it has to do a lot with the gluten, I think, and working gluten with that.
Well, and I wonder also if, especially where this has an egg in it, if you could have whipped a lot of air into your egg to try and make your cake fluffier or lighter. But I don't know. This is speculation.
Yeah.
Don't quote me.
Yeah, and also this one, the reason it wants it to be dissolved in the hot water is to release the gases that help it expand and grow. So if I hadn't done that, this would have expanded a lot more. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to put this into my grease pan. I recommend, I forgot to look at how big this is.
9 inch?
9 inch. Yeah, so you don't want, because I did use one, the one that I used earlier it's a little bit taller and smaller diameter. And it didn't cook as well in the middle. It cooked beautifully around the edges. And then I stuck a toothpick in the middle and it came back raw. So this is a lot better. It only has, is that about an inch? Not even, right there, my finger. And so this will work out a lot better. You'll get much more even bake. It'll still be good. I just didn't have any tin foil to be able to go around the edge, so that way it would not cook as much along the edge. So this is very sticky and heavy. So make sure you got a good handle on your bowl. And that's gonna plop down there.
Yeah. Lynn pointed out that they also, of course, had yeast. And one of the reasons they developed baking powder, from my reading, is because somebody's wife was allergic to yeast. But they could have had yeasted cakes.
Interesting. Yeasted, yeah, I feel like yeasted cakes. Why do I know? I've watched way too much Great British Baking Show that I know that they've talked about yeasted cakes. I just cannot place the episode. I just watched the most recent season that just aired on Netflix. Very fun. They did some interesting stuff. They did a whole free episode. So speaking of allergies, they did the whole gluten-free, vegan, other something free. And they had to make like cakes like that. So yeah, like I said, this is sticky. Just gotta gently push it around a bit so that way you get to the edges of your pan. Keep trying to get more of this. I want more. So yeah, I mentioned that John Turner I and John Turner II traded in molasses, and they would have traded it down. John Turner I actually had a cousin, also named Turner. So don't get confused about that. I get confused about it all the time. It's a very interesting choice in names. And so what John Turner the First would do is he would trade codfish and lumber down to the Caribbean to his cousin who had a plantation that was run with enslaved people. And the codfish would be used to feed the enslaved people. And John Turner the First would take the would take the molasses and sugar and spices and then bring it up to England for finished goods. And then he'd bring it also back over to Salem, where he would turn the molasses into rum. There was a lot of rum drinking going on. And I think, I'm just speculating here, but I think a lot of the popularity with rum in Salem probably has to do with all of the seafaring folk, rum rations and such. So I'm just I got some of my dough on the batter on the side, and I don't want that to burn and create a not so fun smell and taste. There we go, just gonna clean that up. All right, so that's ready to pop in the oven for a half hour. So really quick bake. And take it out and check the middle. Please check all the way down in the middle, because the first one I made of this, the top portion of it was cooked through, but then I got down to this lower portion right here was not cooked through, and I didn't realize until I cut it all the way through and then looked, and I'm like, this is half raw. Sad. Great flavor. Don't eat it. So yes, make sure that you have the proper pan and that it is cooked fully through. It is deceiving, especially because it's a dark color. You think it's done because it's a nice golden brown, but it starts out as a nice golden brown. So don't let it fool you like it has fooled me. So are there any questions? Well, I try not to get molasses everywhere. This molasses comes from New Jersey, which is interesting. I tried to find some sort of Caribbean molasses to try and make it a little bit more historical. But no, this comes from New Jersey. Any questions in the chat? Yeah. Comments, concerns, anyone concerned, please tell me if you're concerned. I need to nip that in the bud.
Heather says, I don't suppose you'd frost that kind of cake. What would you serve it with?
Based on the large slice that I had earlier, as you saw, there was that large slice taken out. Yeah, we enjoyed this before the live. Just adding some butter on top, like it was nice and warm, and just like melting some butter on top would be so good. Holly wanted it with some whipped cream, also would be really good, or ice cream. I think some nice vanilla ice cream is so good.
Lynn suggested powdered sugar on top.
Yes, I think that would also make it look very nice, as well as adding a little extra sugary goodness. My hands are so sticky.
Donna asked, how were things like molasses sold? Did they have glass jars, or did they use some sort of pottery? I was Googling. I think it was in barrels, because I was Googling this question last week when we were looking at the recipe, and I could not get anyone to give me a direct answer on it at all. It was very frustrating.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's barrels based on so John Turner II's probate inventory. So all the stuff he owned when he died, he had a molasses and sugar warehouse. And so the molasses was being stored in gallons and gallons of molasses. So it definitely would have been shipped in those barrels, and then they probably would have maybe sold those to stores, which might do whatever it is that they wanted to with it, maybe put it in jars if they had it, or some sort of pottery. So I think that would be up to the distributor, whereas it would be definitely, I believe, transported overseas and into those warehouses in those gallons barrels. So.
Let's see. Would this be a meal or a dessert?
Dessert. This is one of those luxury desserts, especially a luxury because of the sugar and molasses. So not only does it have sugar, which is by itself expensive, it also has the molasses, which is also expensive and difficult to get, because you have to get it all the way from the Caribbean. So that's one of those luxury items that the Turners were able to have because they were such wealthy maritime traders. They would not have had it for Christmas though. Was that one of the next questions?
Yes, the next question was, my understanding is molasses and sugar were very expensive in the colonial days. Same thing with spices. Would this type of cake or treat be something made for special occasions only, like Christmas?
It possibly would have been, yes, for special occasions, but not specifically for Christmas, because Salem was settled by Puritans, and Puritans did not like Christmas. Unfortunately, we're not doing our Christmas tour at the Gables this year. We have to revamp it. We got to do some more research. We're hoping it will come back better than before. So fingers crossed that we'll be able to have time to fix that. But Puritans saw Christmas, first off, the Christmas that we celebrate, December 25th, is associated with the pagan calendar, which is why, so when Christmas was being established, it was because Christians or the church was trying to convert pagans. And so they were trying to like, oh, look, you have a special holiday on this day. So do we. Here, let's make it make sense for you. And it's a conversion technique. Plus, it was a time when the harvest was done. The beer was ready to drink. So it was a time of laziness, eating excess, drinking excess, and so it led to some not so good behavior, which the Puritans didn't like so much. So they actually outlawed Christmas in Salem. If you went over to Marblehead on the other side of the harbor, you could celebrate Christmas, but not here in Salem. There was way too much trouble associated with Christmas, and the Puritans did not like it. Christmas wasn't really celebrated the way that we know it until the late 1800s. In the about 1840s, the Ingersoll, so Susanna Ingersoll would have gone to church for a Christmas service and then maybe had a Christmas meal. So it would have looked a little bit more like what we have today. And then the tree wouldn't have been implemented until definitely the late 1800s, more into the 1900s. It was a German tradition that was mostly seen in Pennsylvania and then moved its way up to New York, and then eventually coming up into New England.
It was also popularized by Queen Victoria because she married a German, Prince Albert, and he brought the Christmas tree over. So people who were influenced by the whole Victorian era and Victorian fashion were very influenced towards Christmas trees by that.
Yes, if the Queen does it, we must all do it. Didn't we have a revolution against that?
Someone's asking, Julie says, since you have tasted this, Kaylee, would it go well with cider?
Cider there. Yes, it would. I'm just like, now I want to test it with cider. I'm looking at the cider in the fridge. Yes, it would go very well with cider. That would be good.
If anyone has had that Boston brown bread, it tastes like a little bit sweeter version of a can of B&M Boston brown bread, minus the raisins. So if you're not a fan of raisins in your brown bread, this is a great version.
But if you want raisins, you can just throw raisins in there. I don't think it would hurt. I probably wouldn't put chocolate chips in there. I don't think that would taste as good. But the raisins, some sort of like fruit actually, I think would go very well with it. It's a nice little burst of fresh flavor, fruity flavor in a bite, which I definitely actually would recommend. I think that would taste good.
Ooh, Anne suggests citrons.
Suggested what?
Citrons, like lemon things.
Citrusy things?
Yeah.
Got it. I'm just like,
well, I believe citrons are a specific thing, actually. They're French.
I thought that was French for lemon.
Heather also says, in the beginning, it was mentioned that the spices were obtained at a local store. Where was that again?
Salem Spice. It's on Pickering Wharf, so it's literally right down the street from the Gables. It's great. They have so many spices. It smells so good in there. That's where I go to get all my spices. It's so yummy.
And Emma added that Queen Charlotte, King George III's husband, introduced Christmas trees to England in the late 1700s, so a little bit before Victoria and Albert, though I don't know how widespread it was at that point.
Yeah, it wasn't that, based on the research that we've been able to do, wasn't widespread. Like I said, our Christmas tour needs to be updated, so it might find that maybe there was some more to it that we've missed. So like I said, to be determined with that, yeah. Yeah, that's gonna sit in there for a half hour. So if we are out of questions, then I will have to say good night. We will be doing, oh, we have one more question.
We are used to having desserts most times after dinner, but were desserts only special events?
Dessert is a luxury thing, especially what we associate with dessert does involve sugar. And sugar was a luxury. And so you would have time, you would need the money for that, and you would need the time for the leisure, because leisure was also something that you only had if you had money. If you didn't have money, you couldn't laze about doing whatever you wanted, like just chilling out, having dessert and cakes.
And then Anne clarified her point, and she said citron is a semi-tropical fruit that is similar to lemon, but with thicker skin.
Interesting.
Thank you, Anne.
No, thank you for clarifying.
We have learned things.
Yes. So please join us for our next Colonial Classics in January. I skipped a month. I'm also forgetting did I do a cheat sheet? No, I usually have a cheat sheet, guys. I forgot what day. It's going to be the first Wednesday of the month in January. I'll try and send it in the email as a reminder for you guys. We also have a member exclusive event for our members that's coming up on December 10th. We have some caroling and a special discounted pricing in the store if you want to come and get some of that Christmas shopping done. We'll have stuff in the store will be open, and yummy things as well, and yummy fun things to do. So if you're interested in that, come around.
Anne is got our back tonight. She says January 5th for the next Colonial Classics.
Thank you, Anne.
And then Julie says happy holidays all. Anne says great job. Thank you so much. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Happy holidays. Do a little close up. There we go.